Today, you will learn 15 animated widgets with Flutter. Let's start right now with the number 1.
The AnimatedAlign Widget. First, we will need to create a boolean selected set as false. Inside the app, we will have a gesture detector, and this one will have a non-tap function that sets state the selected to the invert of the selected. Again, this one is the boolean. The child will be a center with a container inside. The width will be double.infinity. The height will be 250. And the color will be blue-gray. The child of the container will be the AnimatedAlign. For the alignment, we will say if it's selected, then the alignment will be top right, and otherwise it will be bottom left. The duration of this animation will be 1 second. You can also have a curve. This one we will use the curves.fast out slow in. The child of the AnimatedAlign will be the Flutter logo with the size 50. And now every time we press on the gesture detector, the Flutter logo will go from one corner to the other. And the purpose of the AnimatedAlign is to animate the transition between the alignment of the widget. The AnimatedBuilder Widget. For this example, we will need to import the Dart math, and we will need to add the width ticker provider state mixin. I will show you when we will use this one. With this, we can create an animation controller called controller. This one is an animation controller. The duration will be 10 seconds. And to complete this one, we need also the vsync this. This one is available only because we use the width ticker provider state mixin. So make sure that you have this one. We also want to make sure that when the animation finishes after 10 seconds, that we repeat the animation. As usual, when we use a controller, we need also to dispose the controller. So we will use controller.dispose. Inside the center widget, we will use the child AnimatedBuilder. The animation will be the controller that we have created, and the child will be a Flutter logo with the size 100. The widget need also to have a builder with the context and the child. We can now return the transform.rotate. For this, we will need inside the angle, and the angle will be the controller.value times 2 times math times pi. And we have access to the number pi because we have imported the Dart math. Finally, we have the child, which is this one. This code will generate a Flutter logo that will rotate forever. But instead of the rotate, you can use also the scale and the translate. In this example, we have only used the rotate. The animated container. Let's start this one by adding a boolean selected set as false. The gesture detector will have the untap and the child center. The untap will set state and reverse the value of the selected. Again, the selected is the boolean that we have set at the beginning. In the center, we will have a child animated container. For the width, if the selected is true, it will be 200. Otherwise, it will be 100. The height will have the same logic. If it's selected, then it will be 100. Otherwise, it will be 200. The color of the animated container will be blue-gray if the selected is true. Otherwise, the color will be white. Now for the alignment, we will say if the selected is true, then the alignment will be center. Otherwise, the alignment will be top center. The duration of this animated container will be 2 seconds. We can also have a curve, which will be fast out, slow in. The child of the animated container will be a Flutter logo with the size 75. And you can see that when I press on the gesture detector, all the characteristics of the animated container will be animated. The width, the height, the color, and the alignment of the child. This widget is very simple to implement. The AnimatedCrossFade Widget. We start by creating a boolean set as true. Inside the column, we will have multiple children. The first one will be a sized box with a height of 100. Under, we will have a text button. This one will have the onPress that set state the boolean to the invert of the boolean. And the child of the text button will be a text saying switch. This will be used to trigger the AnimatedCrossFade widget. The third widget inside the column will be the AnimatedCrossFade. The first thing we need to add is the first child, which will be an image. The second child will be another different image. And then you can use the crossfade state. If the boolean is true, then we will say crossfade state.show first. This will show the first child. Otherwise, crossfade state.show second. This one will show the second child. The duration of this animation will be 1 second. With all this, when you press on the switch button, this will animate a fade transition between the two widgets. Our two widget is only two image, but you can do this with any widget. The AnimatedDefaultTextStyle Widget. We start by creating a boolean called first. This one will be set as true. We have also a double font size, which will be 60, and a color that will be blue. Inside a column, we will have multiple children. The first one will be a sized box with the height 120. The child will be an animated default text style. This one will take a duration which will be 300 milliseconds. The style will be a text style. The font size will be the font size variable. The color will be the color variable. And the font weight will be bold. This animated default text style will have a child, which will be a text saying Flutter. To trigger the animation, we will create the text button widget in the column. The onPress will be used to set state. Inside we have the font size. If the variable boolean first is true, it will be 90, otherwise it will be 60. The color will be the same logic. If first is true, then the color will be blue, otherwise red. And then we will reverse the value of the first boolean. The child of the text button will be a simple text switch. And now every time that you press on the switch, this will trigger the animated default text style. And you can see that the size of the text is animated, the color also. The animated icon. The first thing we will do is add the WidthTakerProvider state mixin right after the extend state. I will tell you why we need this later. Next, we need to create a boolean isPlay that we will set as false when we start, and a late animation controller, which we call controller. With this, we can create the init state, and inside we will say that the controller is equal to an animation controller. The duration will be 1 second, and then we use the vsync this. And we need the WidthTakerProvider because otherwise the vsync this will not work. I will put back the WidthTakerProvider and then we will work on the dispose method. Inside this one, we will just need to dispose the controller when we don't use it anymore. Now it's time to work on the UI. In the center widget, we will use a gesture detector. The argument onTap will trigger a if-else condition. If the isPlay is equal to false, then we will say that the controller.forward. And we will set the isPlay as true. Otherwise, we will say the controller.reverse, and the isPlay will be equal to false. Forward means that we will have the next icon, and reverse means that we will have the previous icon. The child of the gesture detector will be the animated icon. Inside we have the icon AnimatedIcon.playPause. This is the first icon, and this is the second one. The progress will be a controller. This is an animated controller. And we will set the size at 100. If you restart the application, you will have a play pause button that is animated. This is called the animated icon. The AnimatedList Widget. We start by creating a list of items. And then we will create also a key that is a global key. This will be used for the AnimatedList Widget. We need to create a function to add items inside the list. First, we will say items.insert. We will insert at the index 0, and we will add a string item with the number of the last item. By example, it will be item 1, item 2, item 3. And because we don't use the set state, but we add items inside the same state, we will use the key that we have created, .currentState, and we will insert an item inside. We will add the new item in the index 0, and the duration will be 1 second. We need to create another function for remove the item. For this, we use the same logic, the key.currentState.removeItem. But in this one, you can see that we need first the index and then a builder. So we will remove the index that we have received from the argument, and we will create a builder. The builder will return a size transition, and the size transition is just used to make the item go smaller and smaller until it disappears. The size factor will be the animation that we receive from the builder, Then we have a child, which will be a card. We will add a margin inside this card, a color red, and the child will be a list style. In the list style, we will have the text deleted, and the style will be a font size of 24. If you go over remove item, you will see that you need also a duration. We will say that the duration is 300 milliseconds. Because we remove it from the current state, we need to remove it from the list also. So we will say items that remove at index. Now we are ready to build the UI. So inside a column, we will have our children. The first one will be a sized box of height 10. We will have an icon button. When we press on it, this will add an item, and the icon will be icon add. Under, we will have an expanded widget, and inside we have the animated list. This one will have the key that we have created earlier. Inside we have the initialize item count. We will start at 0. The padding will be an edge and sets.all 10. And we have the item builder. You can see that this one needs the context, the int, and the animation. So we will have the context, index, and animation. We will return again the size transition. This time we will use it to make the item go bigger and bigger until it have its final form. We will use a unique key for all of these size transition. We will have a size factor that is the animation that we receive from the animated builder. The child will be a card. Inside we have the margin 10, the color orange accent. The child will be a list style. The title will be a text, and inside we will have the index of the list of items. This will be, by example, item 1, item 2, item 3. The style will be a font size of 24. In the trailing, we have an icon button. The icon will be delete, and when we press on it, this will trigger the remove item with the current index. With all this, when we press on the icon button, this will add an item. And you can see that with the size transition, the item is going bigger and bigger until it have its final form. And if you click on delete the item, this will remove the item in 300 milliseconds. This is how you create an animated list with Flutter. The animated modal barrier. First thing we need is the import .async, and then after the extend state, we will use the with single ticker provider state mixin. I will tell you why we need this later. For this, we need to set up multiple variables. The first one is a boolean isPressed, set as false. Next, we have a widget animated modal barrier, an animation controller, an animation color, call it the color animation. And with this, we can use the override init state to initialize everything. First, we need a variable that is a color tween. This one will begin with the color orange accent with opacity 0.5 and will end with the color blue-gray with the opacity 0.5. With this, we can say that the animation controller is equal to an animation controller with the vsync this, and this is why we need the with single ticker provider state mixin. Otherwise, the this will not be available. We need also a duration of 3 seconds for this example. With the animation controller, we can create a color animation. This one is from the color tween.animate. And inside, we just put the animation controller that we have just created. The last step is to create the animated modal barrier. This one is an animated modal barrier. Inside, we have the color, which is the color animation that we have just created, and a demisable that we will set as true. With all this, we can start creating our widget for the UI. You can see that we have a center, a padding, a column, and inside the column, we have multiple widgets. The first one will be a sized box with a height 100 and 250 with a stack widget inside. In the stack widget, we will have the alignment direction center and a children. The first one will be an elevated button. The style will be color orange, and the child will be a text pressed. Now we need the onPress, and for the onPress we will set state and say that the isPressed is equal to true. This is a variable that we have created at the beginning. After the set state, we will say that the animation controller reset, and then we will use the same animation controller to forward the animation. And the last step is to use a future.delay with a duration of 3 seconds. And after the 3 seconds, this will set state and say that the isPressed is now equal to false. So what will happen is this will tell that the button has been pressed will not be accessible until the 3 seconds has finished, and then the isPreset will be false, and the button will be available once again. But we still need to add the AnimatedModalBarrier, and for this, inside the stack widget, we will say if isPreset, then we will show the AnimatedModalBarrier widget that we have created at the beginning. Now if you reset the application and you press on the button, you will see an animated model barrier going over the button for 3 seconds, and the button will not be clickable until the model barrier has vanished. The AnimatedOpacity widget. You need to create a double opacity level that we will start by setting up at 1.0. Inside a center and a column widget, we will add the first widget, which is the animated opacity. This one will have the opacity of the opacity level that we have just created. The duration of the animation will be 2 seconds. The child will be a Flutter logo with the size 50. And under this widget, we will have the elevated button. The child is a text saying fade logo. And when we press on this, we will set state and we will say that if the opacity level is currently 0, then it will be 1, and otherwise it will be 0. And with all this, you can animate the opacity of the Flutter logo. You can see that it takes 2 seconds to vanish completely in the screen. The animated padding. First thing we need is a double padding value, which we call at 0 when we start. This one is just the value of the padding that will be used inside the AnimatedPadding widget. In the column with multiple widget, we will have the first widget that is an elevated button. The style will be a color orange accent. The child will be a text change padding. And when we press on it, this will set state and change the value of the padding value. If the padding value is currently equal to 0, then it will be 100. Otherwise, it will be 0. This line of code will just alternate between 0 and 100 for the padding value. Under the elevated button, we will have a text saying padding is equal to the padding value. Under we have the animated padding that use the padding agentsets.all with the pad value variable. The duration is 2 seconds. We can add a curve animation. This one will be the is in out, but you can use any curve. The child is a container, and the width is the mediaQuery.ofContext.size.width, which is the width of the screen. The height will be the height of the screen divided by 4. The color is orange accent. And every time you press on the change padding, this will set the padding as 0 or 100. And you can see that the animation of the padding is done automatically by Flutter with the AnimatedPadding widget. The animated physical model. Step number 1 is to add a boolean isFlat set as true. Then inside the center and a column, we have multiple widgets. The first one is the animated physical model. And you can see that this requires the child, the color, the duration, and multiple other arguments. The first one we will add is the duration of 500 milliseconds. Then we will have a curve, fast out, slow in, but you can change the curve if you want. The elevation will be, if it's flat, then it will be 0, and otherwise it will be 6. The shape will be a box shape dot rectangle, but you can put circle if you want. The shadow color will be a colors black. The color of the widget will be white. The child will be a sized box with the height and the width of 120. The child is a simple icon with the Android outlined icon. Under this widget, we will have a sized box with the height 20. And an elevated button with the child text click and an onPressed function that will trigger a set state and say that the isFlat boolean is equal to the reverse of the isFlat. So if it's true, then it will be false. If it's false, then it will be true. And with all this, you have created an animated physical model. You can see that every time I click on the button, this creates a shadow animation for the sized box. The AnimatedPositioned Widget. We create a boolean selected set as false to start. Then inside a sized box, we will define the width and the height, which is 200 and 350. The child will be a stack widget with multiple widgets inside. The first one is the animated positioned. The width will be, if it's currently selected, then it's 200, otherwise it will be 50. And we will do the same thing for the height and the top. If it's selected, then it's a value. Otherwise, it's another value. The duration of the animation will be 2 seconds, the curve will be fast out, slow in, and the child will be a gesture detector. When we tap on it, this will set state and say that the selected is equal to the reverse of the selected. If it's currently true, then it will be false. And if it's false, then it will be true. The child of the gesture detector is a simple container with a box decoration, orange, and the border radius circular 25. And every time you press on the container, this will animate the width, the height, the top of the animated positioned. So the position of the widget will be animated. The animated rotation. The first thing we need is a double called turns, and we will set this one as 0. Next, inside a center column, we will add the widget padding with the edge and sets.all 50. The child will be the animated rotation. The turns argument will be the turns that we have declared earlier. The duration will be 1 second, and the child will be a Flutter logo with the size 100. Under the padding in the column, we will have an elevated button. This one will have a child text rotate logo, and the style will be colors.orange accent. Finally, we have the unpress, and when we click on it, this will trigger the set state and will say that the turns is equal to plus 1/4. With all this, when you press on the rotate logo button, this will rotate the Flutter logo 1/4, and you can do it multiple times. This is to create an animation for the rotation of any widget. The AnimatedSize widget. We start with a double size, which we set as 300. Then inside a gesture detector, we will have the untap, and this will trigger a set state, which will say that the size, if it's currently equal to 300, then now it will be 100, otherwise it will be 300. This will just alternate the size between 300 and 100. The child of the gesture detector will be a container. This container will be white. The child is the AnimatedSize widget. Inside we have a curve ease in, but you can use any curve. The duration will be 1 second, and the child will be a simple Flutter logo with the current size. And like this, you can animate the size of any widget. Every time you click the gesture detector, the size will alternate between 100 and 300. The animated switcher. We will create an int called count that we will start at 0. In a center and a column, we will have the first widget called the animated switcher. This one will have a duration of 500 milliseconds. The child will be a simple text with the value count inside. And the style will be the font size at 40. Under, we will have an elevated button. The child will be a text add. And when we press on it, this will set state and add the count plus 1. With this, when you press on the elevated button, you can see that nothing special happened. And this is because you will need to add the key inside the text widget. You can see that we have added the value key, and inside we have the count. And we need the key to track how the animated switcher will work. And you can see now that every time we press on the add button, there is a fade animation between each numbers. And if you want to have a different animation for the animated switcher, you can add the transition builder. This have the child and an animation. Inside you can return, by example, the scale transition. The scale will be the animation that we receive, and the child will be the child that we have. Like this, every time we press on the button, there is a scale transition instead of the fade animation. And this was the animated switcher widget.